Hello, and welcome to learning how to develop custom web application dashboards in R with Shiny. My name is Brian Kafferkey, and I hope you'll take a look at my other YouTube videos if you haven't already, but I cover a lot of different subject areas, but my favorite is probably of all machine learning. I do a lot in automation too, but machine learning and data science is definitely my forte and my excited area, what I get worked up about. And part of this presentation was inspired by, and therefore a plug for, my data science and machine learning group, which meets in the Boston area. I call it the greater Boston area because it's just north of Boston in a town, Burlington, Mass, which is just north of Boston, about 10 miles. And we're going to be having a meetup there, so this is going to be very temporal in terms of how useful it is to you. But if you're in the Boston area and you can make it to a presentation on Shiny, which is going to get into a much deeper dive than I'll do here today. It's called Real World Applications and Best Practices in R with Shiny. But if you can't make it to this, just join the group, get posted, and you might want to join the group even if you're not local, because I do try to do webinars and things like that too. So if I see there are a lot of people, I can always do a webinar and kind of go with that. Don't think we'll be able to record this meeting, partly because it's at Microsoft's headquarters, or their MTC, and there are some restrictions about recording there, but I can do potentially webinars and things like that. So again, plug for the group, join. It's great. It's I love to do this because it just get a lot of different things. And I think you're going to agree as we get into Shiny, it's really, really cool and surprisingly easy to use. So today's goals is to talk about what is Shiny, and again, web application, think that so that you don't tune out yet. What can we do with it? What are its features? How do we use it? And where do we go from here? And I also have a link at the bottom. If you've seen my things before, I always put whatever slides, code, etc. on github.com under bkafferkey/shared. And this should be under Shiny or something like that. Hopefully I'll just call it Shiny. I haven't put it out there quite yet, but it should be out there by the time you watch this video. And the one thing I always like to talk about, but especially when I talk about R and machine learning, is, it's a lot of stuff and you might feel overwhelmed, but don't think of it that way. Think of it as shiny new toys. Hence the word shiny, right? It's shiny stuff. Programmers are always, I think that's why they named it Shiny, because programmers are always like distracted by shiny objects, and then they get excited. And so, discover your inner child, have fun with this stuff, and just enjoy it. It's really cool stuff. Shiny in particular is one of the more fun things I've come across in a long time because it's easy to use and it's very powerful. So if you don't know much about R, I've got other training videos on R. Lots of stuff on YouTube. Subscribe, of course, because I'm always plugging for subscriptions. It makes it easier to know who's watching and what we're getting out of it. And I hope I'm delivering a lot of value to people. But if you don't know about R, I'll just give you a quick synopsis. It's an open source language designed for statistics, data science, and machine learning. Really, it's if you think of languages like SAS or MATLAB or things like that, or even Python now, it's like that. Python's an all-purpose language. R is specifically focused on machine learning, data science, and the like. And as I mentioned, it's open source, so most of what you get, these packages, etc., are maintained by the community. They're free. There's thousands of them, and that's what Shiny is. It's an open source package that gives you a lot of power and capability. And as I mentioned, Shiny is a package, and you can see some of these other ones. So our studio wrote Shiny, and they actually also have someone there that wrote ggplot2, dplyr, and the SQL one I don't think is theirs, but there's a lot of open packages, and Shiny is one of theirs. And we'll talk more about that, but if you're not sure, well, what is a package? If you've ever used any kind of libraries in a programming language, Python has packages and modules. Let's see, R has packages, DLLs for C#, and other languages might have modules as well. PowerShell uses modules. But the idea is it's basically a function or object library. So getting into a little more specifics, okay, we've got a little bit of an idea, I think, but what is Shiny? Well, Shiny is an R package that makes it easy to build interactive apps using the R programming language. And so a couple other points. You can host standalone apps as a web page or on a web page, or embed them in R Markdown. Now, R Markdown is a whole other thing, and I'm going to have to do a presentation on that sometime. It's very, very cool. It's using a sort of high-level, if you will, abstraction of HTML to do publications and documentation. And the implementation that you can get with RStudio's Markdown allows you to do very elaborate things. You can do full-blown web pages and things with Markdown, and it can be used with Shiny. You can also do all kinds of slideshows and all kinds of stuff. And if you've heard of React and stuff, it can work with that. It also works with Bootstrap to sort of assign attributes. So it's helpful if you do Markdown to know a little Bootstrap. And I've used that to tailor my slides, but you can do some really cool stuff. Look at a lot of the R books out there, and they were done completely in nothing but Markdown with some other packages like Knitter and things like that. All right. And you can also extend your Shiny apps with CSS themes and HTML widgets and JavaScript actions. So you're kind of getting the full-blown enchilada here with all the cool bells and whistles that you could do. Typically, you would think of sort of a JavaScript app or something, Node.js or Python, and you get it here. Before I jump in too far, I'll tell you a few things you're going to need to get up and running if you want to do this and you don't already have the tools to do it. So the first thing you're going to need is the R programming language, the R CLI command line interpreter, and you always have to get that, regardless of what IDE you use with it. You need to get the language, and that's available on CRAN. It's really one place you get it. That's CRAN. Microsoft has a variation on it specifically for their machine learning server, but generally for this purposes, you don't have to get that. You just get open source R is fine, and you get that at the link here. And then you want to get RStudio because RStudio is really tightly integrated with being able to develop Shiny apps, and it's really great for that. RStudio is the most popular R development environment, hands down. And frankly, it's an amazing environment. It's a very rich IDE. It's probably my favorite IDE in general to develop in because it's just, especially, it is targeted towards R, but that also means that it can really integrate really nicely with R. So it's really great. And it's free if you get the open source version, which I think a lot of people do use. Then they have server-based versions you can also use. So what can we do with Shiny? Well, we can create complete web applications. Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you've seen things like Python's Django or other things, Microsoft has their IIS-based framework, MVC platform, etc., where you can develop web applications. That's what Shiny can do for you, but it's really very simplified. So in some ways, it may have all the flexibility you would have in something like, say, Django, but it does give you really nice functionality specific to what you would use it for, which is interactive dashboards. And that's really what it's designed for. So you can click and have dynamic adjustments and say, okay, I want to maybe click on different parts of a map. Maybe I want to adjust the expected sales volume, change the year, etc., so I can interact with my visuals. And you can see on the lower right-hand side kind of a little thumbprint of what a visual would look like. So you get an idea there of what's going on. And you can go to shiny.rstudio.com and see that link below. That actually will give you a lot more information. There's a gallery there. There's all kinds of documentation on Shiny, so you'll get plenty to keep you busy. And nicely, you can develop it on your client machine, but you can also deploy it to the cloud or on-premise. So you can have, there's an RStudio. So in any of these products, anytime you have a web framework, you need a server that supports it. And what's key there is the framework itself, but also the language support. So again, I've been doing a lot with Django lately, so I talk a lot about it, but if you were to run a Django web app, you would have to have Python installed on the server that's going to run it. You would also have to have the Django gateway and other things, the Django libraries, etc. And with Shiny, you have to have R support in the back end as well as the Shiny server stuff. And so that's something you can do. There's an on-premise version that you can get and you can install locally. You could also install the Shiny server on a cloud container and work there. Or you can use Shiny.io apps, and I'll take a look at that because that's the easiest way to get started, and then you can decide if you want to stay there or move into something else. Key Shiny features, besides being Shiny. It's mind-blowingly simple to create a web app using R. Now, I'm not a web app developer. I started looking at Shiny, I'm like, click, 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 and a few minutes later, I had a running dashboard on the internet. So that's really powerful. That's very cool. And I honestly can't think of any other tool out there that can do that so quickly and easily with as much flexibility and functionality. Power BI would be the first one that would, but Power BI is really targeted towards drag and drop visuals, a little more like Excel-ish and that type of thing, whereas Shiny is designed for data science and using the R language. So it's a different target. It's much more targeted towards the data science team. It's integrated with RStudio. It's suited for data science related type dashboards. And there's a gallery that can help you get a jump start on dashboards and things you want to do. And you get the full capabilities of the R language, which is significant. And I mentioned you can publish directly out of our studio. Since they have shiny.io, you can publish directly to shinyapps.io, and it integrates with our studio, which is a great way to start. And you gotta love the price, free. If you only want to have like a low tier, really for learning, I would argue, maybe it's very small usage, but you can see there are 5 applications, 25 active hours, so it's fairly limited, but it's a great way to learn. Now I want to give a little background, then I'm going to jump in, I promise, about when we talk about what's going on here. If you've heard of things like JSP, Java Server Pages, or Microsoft Active Server Pages, or Python's Django, as I keep hopping on, what these are basically scripting pages, meaning that you're going to use a language and dynamically generate HTML pages to be sent to a user. So let's take a look at this model. You've got a person on basically on their little computer, and they're going to make a request to get it to a website. They enter a URL. That URL actually directs their request to a specific web server, and the web server gets it, and from the breakout of that URL, it determines, what do I do with this? Well, when you're using some sort of a server pages generator, what it does is it goes to a backend scripting engine, and the backend scripting engine, we'll say it's in Java, will then take what you asked for, and it will determine what it needs to do to satisfy your request. So maybe you asked to see a catalog of certain products, and you filtered it a certain way. So a Java program might run, filter stuff, pull it out of a database, get the results, then put it through some other process where it generates an HTML document and then sends it back to the client. And so that's a request response type model. And the important thing is here that you're always satisfying the protocol HTTP. And that's based around HTML. And if you think about it, it's a very different kind of thing from what it had been before the internet. It used to be, and still can be to some extent, just say a Windows app, you've got all the code and everything right there, and it's interacting immediately. But when you're doing something like this, it's more like, it's almost like email, really. You're sending it over, you make a request to something, and you say, hey, I'd like to see this. And the server has to prioritize that with other things. Oh, okay, and when it can, it pushes that off and asks for a process to figure out, like, what is it they need? Oh, they need this, and it figures it out. And then it's going to create a document. So it's always really requesting a document, and then says, okay, send this response back to them. Here's their document, and that's an HTML page. But to allow that document to be very flexible and dynamic, they dynamically generate it. So they use a programming language to figure out what you need and then dynamically build HTML, which is pretty static, and send it back to you. Right? And making it look pretty and all that stuff is actually something that's really more of a styling thing around it. It has really nothing to do with the programming as a rule. That's why they separated them. But that's sort of the overall model here. So it's, you request something, you send a response back. Request. So, and the two big ones really is like I do a GET request to get a page, but I could also say I want to update some information or do something. I could do a POST request. Each time, though, I'm still sending something over. The server has to figure out what to do. It generates some pages back, does what it has to, it might write to a database and things, but then it's going to send a response back of some type, and that's what the customer or the client machine gets. And so our Shiny, to make all that, just to say that that's what Shiny is doing too. It's one of the tools now that fits in the list of frameworks that allow you to do this thing. But Shiny is something not requiring a developer, and that's the big thing. So dynamically generated, I show you, and Shiny is using basically something called a reactive model, where it's basically you can click and things, and it will dynamically modify things very quickly. And so it's a very fluid type of approach to interacting with a web page. So you can see here, like, just the idea of client sending a request back and response goes back. So the same idea. And I direct you to that link because I got this from a blog and I thought it was a nice simple model to show you what's going on. But in each one of these, the biggest difference is what language is really being used to generate those pages. So it could be Python, it could be Java, it could be C#, or in this case, it's R. And again, it's designed for interaction. So let me step back and I will show you how this looks and works. So I'm going to go into RStudio and decide to put in a cool dark background here. But one of the things I really like with RStudio is you can usually get an example by just going here and saying I want to do something. So I can say I'm going to generate, I want to do a Shiny web app. So right off the bat, and I have to give it a name. So I'll say Brian Shiny 1. And I can say it's multiple files or single file. So you're going to see there's a user interface part of this, And then there's the server side. Now, typically in a different kind of framework, those would always be separate. There'd be the UI HTML page that somebody gets, and then they would make requests, and the back end server would generate pages, and that server side is the piece that generates it. In Shiny, it's put together and it can be done all in one file. Shiny will separate the pieces as it needs to, so it makes it easy for you to work with it. But if you're going to get into anything that's substantial at all, you're going to want to go to separating out the UI and the server pages. So that's going on here. Now I need to create a folder for this. So I'm going to go up here, and you can see I've been doing a little Shiny in my spare time here. So I'll just do this, and I'll say Brian Shiny 1. Okay. I'll select it. And it should be good. Say create. And this is one of the cool things. You can see it actually generated a Shiny app for me. So I've got a nice starting point to build out a Shiny app. I'm not going to actually go into doing a lot with this. I encourage you, if you can come to the user group and see a full-blown explanation of how to develop apps, that'd be great. But I will show you some interesting things about it. So the first thing is you need the library Shiny. So if you don't have it, you can go up to Tools and Install Packages. And right in here, I can just look for Shiny, if I know how to type. And you can see Shiny's here, and among other things. And just say Install, and you're good to go. And we need to bring the library in once you've done that. And then you're going to have a UI part and a server part. And this is the part I mentioned. Normally you'd probably split into two separate files. But I'm not going to go too much into that. A lot of documentation on that. The UI is how is it going to look to the user. So we've got this thing called Fluid Page, which allows the objects on the page to kind of flow. I've got this title panel. And I want to show you something kind of cool here. Let me first load the library. Let's see. Okay, I'm just gonna cut this. I'm gonna cut this down below because notice that everything around here is designed to work as a Shiny app at this point. So I'm gonna run this library Shiny. So I'm running that right in the console. And watch what happens now if I'm gonna cut and paste this and run this in the console, because it's kind of interesting what you get. It generated just very simply here, but HTML, right? That's a header tag. Not sure. I got to be careful what can actually be done here, but let me try this one. Okay, so I got it to see. The nesting here apparently is a dependency I didn't have, but what you can see by running this is it's actually generating HTML, just div tags and properties and inputs and everything. So it's generating the user side, and it's using JavaScript to do a lot of the work. And so it's pretty cool. In this case, I'm generating an input panel. And then you've got the other side, which is the server side, saying, okay, this is what I need you to generate and send back to me. And you notice this last function kind of glues the two pieces together. Here's my UI, here's my server piece, glue these together. So let me try running this. And you can see it invokes its own browser inline, and I can make adjustments and automatically interacts. So that's pretty cool, right? Nice thing I can also do is I can say, yeah, I'm going to publish this. And I've already set up a link here. I'll talk a little bit how to do this. It's a little tricky because there's credentials and stuff if I go in to show you too much about how to do that. So I'll try to show you a little bit and point you in the right direction. But I'm going to say publish this. And notice it's all in one file. And I have an account set up with RStudio Shiny. You can see it's automatically kind of compiling and building and submitting this entire thing. Now this is really amazing. I got to give them credit for this because it's so easy to do this that this is not how Django is. You can't push something out and actually have a website this easily. So it's installing files, it's getting the pieces it needs, pushing the image. Doing a lot of work there. And then it actually brings me in and says, okay, you're good to go. And notice it's on Shiny.io. Okay. So I'm going to restart this. I was running this earlier. Okay, and this will probably be a little bit more responsive. Yeah, you can see it's adjusting. And this is another one I'd done earlier. And I can go back, and this one I actually used another tool called Flex Dashboard, and I'm not going to get into it now, but it might be a good presentation to make also. Flex Dashboard allowed me to kind of do something a little more easily to define tabs. You can do this right within Shiny as well, but I found Flex Dashboard, I'm pretty sure I used that, yeah, I named it FDB. Allowed me to control a little better, and I'll talk a little more about that. Okay, so let me show you how, one way to get into logging into Shiny IO if you need to set up an account. So you can go here and say Global Options, Publishing, and I need to publish, so I can say Connect to. So I can say Connect. And when I do go to Connect, I actually can also do RStudio. That's what I mentioned. You can set up your own Shiny server, and that's this avenue. So I can go to Shiny IO Apps, and here it's going to say, okay, in order to do my initial connection, I have to go in, and I'll show you screens for this, but I need to get basically a token or a key that will allow me to get in. So then I can connect to my account, etc. Go here, and okay. Okay, so that let me get in, and I wanted to just show you this. It's kind of an admin side to this. So I've got my dashboards here. Got applications. You can see, okay, show me all my applications, and you can see these are all the different things I have running. Some are running, some are just, I haven't used them in a long time, so they're sleeping, which I think means they've been kind of turned off. I have account information here I can go to, and then of course I can go to my dashboards, and I can kind of look at one and say, yeah, you know, I really want to take a look at Brian Shiny 1 again. You can see it's here. So it's kind of cool. It looks like, I haven't tried this, but it looks like I can also download this whole thing as a bundle. Probably give it to somebody else so they can get it to use if I want to be able to do that. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, it's stuff you can do. So I wanted to show you something called the Shiny Gallery. And you can see there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. So I can say, yeah, you know, I really want to take a look at this one. And I can get ideas. I don't know if I can actually, I think I can actually get a copy of a lot of these and then download them. Yeah, you see here, get code. So I could play around with it. See where that brings us. Yeah, so I go to GitHub, and now I can actually get stuff from the gallery. So it's a great way to get a jump start and get an idea about what you can do. And when you get, you see this, just this list, you can see that there's a lot of power in this. There's a lot of nice analytics, BI, machine learning kind of dashboards. So very cool stuff. And I think that's the main stuff I needed to show you there. So you've got the Shiny IO server. It's a great way to start. And there's a free tier. Okay. So Shiny deployment, we've kind of take a look at. But again, if we want to do that, we go to Global Options, and then we can do Connect, and we can go in and it'll actually give us an option to connect to Shiny IO, or you can go in there directly, and you're going to create an account first. So create an account, and then you can go in and set the settings, and that's where it's going to walk you through kind of getting a token, cutting and pasting it. So here you see shinyio.app, and then you can go in there. Once you've got a well-developed Shiny app, you have a lot of options. So we've heard about two of them. There's the Shiny Apps IO, whatever that is, shinyapps.io, and there's also the RStudio Connect, which allows you to install that directly either in a container or on premise. And because you do have that option of creating your own instance of the service, you could also put it easily on Azure. So you could set up in a container in Azure, and then you could run it out of there. So, and the advantage of Azure, little plug, but I do really think Azure has the best cloud platform. Maybe that's why I went to work for Microsoft. Because number one, it's very secure. It's got high availability. They have a lot of SLAs around a lot of services. It's very scalable, reliable, and it has a lot of complementary services. So one of the things I really like is that you can choose one thing. A lot of customers worry, like, oh my gosh, if I go this direction, I'll be stuck, right? I'm in a corner. I used Azure SQL DB and I'm stuck there. It's like, no. You can use Azure SQL DB, and you can use the SQL Data Warehouse, and you can use blob storage, and they all connect and they all work together. So you're never really in a box. So you're never trapped. So that's a good reason also, I think, why looking at taking your product and moving it into Azure is a good option. And there's this log here, a blog, that you can go to from our bloggers that I haven't walked through it, so I will not. I put disclaimers on this. I can't say that it all works and it's great, but it is something that talks about how you can Dockerize a Shiny app, and then you could basically put it wherever you want. So that's kind of nice. Now, I do want to talk to a few limitations, okay? Nothing's perfect. Everything has its sort of ideal use case. If if I have a family with 5 kids, a Porsche that seats 2 people, we'll say, is not a good option, even though it's an awesome car maybe for the right person. And then on the same token, if you're a 2-person couple, maybe a minivan isn't what you really want. Maybe you'd rather have that a Maserati or something. And so nothing is designed for everyone, and I think that's true with Shiny as well. So I want to frame that as I walk into this. So it's not designed for generalized web applications. At least I don't think it is. People at our studio could disagree. So if you're thinking, I want to build a shopping cart app and I'm going to let people buy apples and tomatoes and stuff, I don't think this is the right tool. That's where I'd say go to Django, and I'll probably do something in Django later because it is good for that. But if you're saying, I want to take these R stuff, it's the first thing you got to say is, I'm working in R. And I want to let people see my visuals. I want to let them play with the model I created. Maybe I do some machine learning, interacting with the dashboard or whatever. That's a good use case. But because it's also about how much heavy lifting in data terms you're doing, make sure it can interact in a quick way. And that's really more on the data side than the R side, if it can work that way. I found initially using Shiny, this nesting functions in Shiny can get very confusing very quickly. And so I actually put out a message on Twitter, and somebody, I think it was our studio, said, have you looked at Flex Dashboard? So I found, and I need to go back to some of this, but I found, and I showed you an example, Flex Dashboard was a way that allowed me to kind of create a little cleaner structure around it without as much complexity. And I may do another presentation on that. So if you start getting into Shiny and you're like me and you start to say, oh God, I'm losing track of parameters and commas and parentheses, look up Flex Dashboard. There's links and stuff, and it's well documented. So take a look at that. It not only does it work well with Shiny apps and stuff, but it can also be used within Markdown, and Shiny can also be used in Markdown to create really nice, really more presentations with the two together. So again, it can be a little complex. It can get a little unwieldy if you try to build out too much with it. Now, in terms of integration, I was kind of wondering, so how well does Shiny integrate with other things? Well, it is like anything. It's kind of designed to be its own thing. But I found this link, which I thought was really cool. There's a package called Reticulated-Shiny, which allows you to integrate. And I have not tried it, so let me know how it does. Put comments. I'd love to hear how this works. But I did see a few good comments online. You can integrate Python code, which I got to say, that's pretty powerful, because now you can get the best of both worlds. Python is an awesome language. R is an awesome language. I really like the two together. So if you can get that, that's awesome. And debugging was something I also saw online. There's an article there, a link that talks about debugging. I can see where that could be a bit of a challenge with Shiny. So try to take a look at that. If you get into some complexity, you might have some issues trying to debug, but there's some discussion there, and I think there are some tools to help with that. So we covered a lot, and it was meant to just give you a smattering. I hope I've whet your appetite. What I really want here is for you to get interested and say, that's cool, I'm going to go research it, or better yet, come to a meeting if you can, but just research it. It's one of the most exciting things I've seen out there in a long time, just because it's so easy to use and has so much power. And we've talked about all the things we can do with it, and how to use it, the ease of use. And the way do we go from here is really, again, go out there, start with ourstudio.com and look at the documentation they have, because there's tons of stuff on Shiny. They do workshops and training on it. The people that wrote Shiny teach classes on it, so you can go right to the horse's mouth and learn all about it. And I've met the people at our studio. They are really amazing. They have the cream of the crop of R developers. Hadley Wickham developed dplyr, as well as ggplot2. And I mean, I could go through a who's who list of people in the R community who develop these open source modules. So yeah, they're great to get as a resource in the R world. So what I do want to do now is do my usual plug: subscribe, share, really share, let other people see this stuff. Look at my other content. I do a lot of Azure, a lot of big data stuff. I do a lot with automation and PowerShell too, because just found that fascinating. A lot of stuff with R, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you again, and thank you.